Hi, I'm Noah Billig. I'm an associate professor of landscape architecture. Today we are going to look at some examples of community-based efforts and design in South Fayetteville, where we will also work through a design project based on community input or community-based design. Community-based design is a value-based system where we get input from community members. Community might be your school, it could be teachers, it could be residents, it could be fellow students, it could be other members of your neighborhood or community. Community design, in the broadest sense, is a movement for discovering how to make it possible for people to be involved in shaping and managing their environment. Community design stands for an alternative style of practice based on the idea that professional technical knowledge is often inadequate in the resolution of social problems. It is an umbrella term covering community planning, community architecture, social architecture, community development, and community participation, all of which emphasize the involvement of local people in the social and physical development of the environment in which they live. Community design represents the addition of moral and political content to professional practice. Something we need to note is that effective community design starts by listening. This includes listening to community members and stakeholders of a project. There are examples of more top-down, government-driven projects that might be considered part of community design. In Fayetteville and other cities, we have bike path and trail systems. There are trails that provide opportunities for recreation and community connections. They provide public spaces for gathering, as well as a venue for art and expression. In addition to these more top-down, government-driven examples of community design, there are other examples we'll look at in Fayetteville that involves more participation from the community. The Yvonne Richardson Center is an example of community design in action. The community center offers activities for children. It also offers adult activities and open family gym times. It includes some examples like little free libraries. It includes examples of art. It includes examples of pavilions and community gardens. Every year, the American Society of Landscape Architects student organization participates in Parking Day. On this day, landscape architects and students transform a parking spot into a temporary pop-up parklet. This is a nationwide effort, and at the University of Arkansas, ASLA student chapter transforms these two spots on Dixon Street into parklets, featuring seating, outdoor art, and green space. This has now become a permanent installation. There are also examples of art as community design in action. Upstream Art is a storm drain mural project in Fayetteville. The unique and engaging educational program utilizes art to communicate the function and importance of storm drains. Upstream Art gives artists the opportunity to express themselves with semi-permanent public art in the form of small-scale outdoor storm drain murals. The purpose of Upstream Art is to draw attention to the usually discrete concrete and iron infrastructure with the hope that observers stop and think about where water flows after it enters a storm drain.
Community design is traditionally described as an alternative form of practice. And to me, I think it has emerged as something that's more central to practice. Any intervention into the built environment requires the balancing of public and private interests, and community design emerged out of a need to address more of the public's interest versus private interest of those who are able to financially support the development of projects. So what it does is it brings to bear technical expertise and skills that designers have and bring those to the table so that they can be balanced with community leaders, stakeholders, residents, end users who have intimate knowledge of what they may need. So in terms of community design, it really is about addressing social needs of the broader community and broader humanity. One thing that's critical in community design is for people who are invested in it, it's predicated on a level of trust. There has to be trust with the community that you're working with, there has to be trust amongst stakeholders, and there has to be trust amongst the designers that are working together. So community-based projects that I've been involved with in the past really can be categorized two ways. There's two forms. One that are inherently local and place-based, others that address needs that might be more global in consideration and suggest the use of something that is mobile as a mechanism. One of the projects that I'll talk about that's place-based is Project RE, which is located in the Homewood neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Project RE is a 20,000 square foot facility that was built as a community partnership. It leveraged the assets of the Urban Design Build Studio as a nonprofit design build organization that focuses on participatory design and the development of projects, a material repurposing center, and a series of nonprofit organizations focused on job skill training for local residents as well as citizens reemerging into society post-incarceration. That center is now part of all the Urban Redevelopment Authority community meeting process. There are several enterprises that use that facility in the city, and it's become a magnet, and it's an open door for community members. And it's demonstrating a positive way for community members to transform their neighborhoods. Related to Project RE is a project called Refab, which is a mobile project. And so just as the job skill training becomes important for residents and a project that's in place, Refab is a mobile fabrication unit that is intended to demonstrate and provide access to youth in challenged neighborhoods, provide access to fabrication equipment that architecture students we all feel is second nature or something that we've come to expect. But the public at large, even though it's becoming more common, doesn't really know what a CNC router can do, what a 3D printer has capabilities of doing, what a laser cutter might do. So this unit is brought around to work with schools and other organizations and communities and is hitched on the back of a pickup truck, but it has a full capability 3-axis CNC machine, laser cutter, and 3D printer. So the idea is really to bring the asset to the community and allow them to utilize it on their terms and allow them to engage with it in a way that's meaningful to them.
In community design, we promote design advocacy. This can work through a range of scales. Design advocacy can include multi-million-dollar projects. It can also include small-scale neighborhood interventions by community members. Design advocacy and community design sometimes is designing for a community, and sometimes it's designed from a community. Either way, we should be designing with a community. When you think about participatory design, when you think about community design, and consider design advocacy in your project, think about the different people involved. Perhaps you can contact a teacher or a principal from a school. Perhaps you can contact a city official, or perhaps you can contact some neighborhood leaders. All of these people could help advocate for your design ideas and can give you feedback on how to get these designs potentially implemented. Now that we've seen some examples of community design in Fayetteville, Bo and Sloan will walk you through a community design project.
Hey everybody, I'm Bo Burris. I'm a fifth-year landscape architecture student here at the FAY Jones School.
And I'm Sloan Alger, and I'm a recent graduate from the interior design program here at FAY Jones.
So now that Noah's given everybody a little bit of a primer on what community design is and what the possibilities of it are, we're going to be doing a little demo project and kind of taking you through step by step what it takes to get one of these community design projects not only on paper, but hopefully in the ground.
So the first step of that is going to be to start to brainstorm. Where do we begin with projects like this? And sometimes it helps just to get a lot of ideas out on paper, because that'll start to sort of help you generate ways and places that your design abilities might be able to help your own community.
So we're really wanting to focus right here on campus, and we've been reaching out to some of our peers, some of our neighbors on campus, and some community leaders, and kind of getting a feel for what everybody's concerned about on campus and what we can possibly have the most impact with. So we've started, as our diagram shows, with the University of Arkansas campus, and hopefully we can think of something that can be replicated in the rest of Fayetteville. And then we kind of just want to loosely make a bubble diagram about what matters here, what we can hopefully affect. When we're thinking about community design along those same lines, we're usually dealing with limited resources, limited time, and limited help with getting it done. So we want to do like a sort of acupuncture, and we want to achieve the most we can with the least amount of work and the least amount of resources. So one thing that always seems to work for, we've highlighted some of these problems like food insecurity, unused green space, loss of habitat. And here on campus, that really presents itself in a lack of really rich layered planting material and a presence of a lot of lawn or turf grass and just mowed situations like you would probably find on most lawns in your neighborhood. This is kind of an ecological dead space. It doesn't support a lot of habitat. It obviously doesn't support any food or grow any beautiful flowers. So we're thinking of how we can perhaps take some of these turf spaces around campus and turn them into a garden that's not only beautiful and provides habitat, but that can be used to grow food for our community that's dealing with a lot of food insecurity.
So now that we've figured out that maybe a garden is the best course of action of implementing here on campus, the best way to kind of begin to get your feet on the ground and start moving this project a little bit further is to identify who your stakeholders are. Who are the people that can help you further this project? Who are the people that own the land? Who are the people that can ultimately assist you in a lot of the ways that you maybe aren't equipped to make these projects happen? So we've already started to begin to analyze and kind of again bullet point or make smaller diagrams about who these people are and the different organizations and power levels they might be in, because there might be certain organizations like Seven Hills or Tricycle Farms here in Fayetteville who have a lot of interest in helping you with a project like this, but some of the more school-related organizations or other student clubs on campus might actually have the funds or the other additional sort of amenities to help you make these things happen.
So we want to talk about stewards especially. Our stewards are going to be one of the most important stakeholder groups that we talk to and that we interact with, because they're going to be the ones that ultimately take care of this project. An issue with community gardens that we're super aware of is that they get built and the community's excited and engaged, and then they kind of fall away. So one way that being on campus is a pretty big asset to us is we have a lot of clubs, a lot of departments here at the U of A that are super engaged with horticulture, with gardening, with food production. We even have the Full Circle Food Pantry here on campus that can hopefully use some of the produce we get. And so all of these stakeholders, we want to just kind of organize like who's doing what and how we can best serve them and how they can best help us to get this project done.
So now that we've identified both the stakeholders and the project that you want to accomplish, you need to go out and find a site. So that's going to be the place that you're going to make this project happen, and hopefully is close and near and accessible to where you are. We're about to head out here in a second and sort of explore both the lawns and the areas around the FAY Jones building to see if there are any particular sites that would be great for our project.
We're going to bring our sketchbooks, we're going to bring our phone cameras, we're going to just be prepared to document everything we see and make a really educated decision on what's going to be the most impactful site for our design project. So for this step of the community design process, we're going to be doing site selection. It's really important when we're picking out a site to focus pretty intently on our stakeholders.
And so whenever you're picking a site, there are a couple different characteristics and things you want to look for or check out when picking your location.
So in site selection, we also want to think a lot about circulation patterns that are going to increase the visibility of our site and increase the impact. The sidewalks around us all kind of connect this core of campus where there's a lot of just student traffic and a lot of, as well as visitors traffic. A lot of prospective students will pass by with their parents and families, and they're going to take what they learn here and bring it home wherever that is in the country. So we want to think about who's going to see this project, that it's going to further its reach and hopefully bring it to a whole bunch of other places.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to projects that are related to community design, that idea of community is the most important aspect. Like back to what Bo was saying about reach, how many people are going to be around this project, not only during the school year, but during the summer. And, if we were to invest in putting or building in some sort of garden here on campus, who are the people that are going to take care of that, and how do we make those connections and make sure that it can sustain itself throughout the year?
Exactly. We want to think a lot about stakeholders too. Some of our biggest stakeholders are within a 2-minute walk of this spot, including the Fay Jones School. Just on the other side of this building is the Ag Building, where there are obviously a lot of students interested in horticulture, food production, habitat for wildlife, as well as we're just a short walk from the Union, which is the absolute center of campus and where a lot of our clubs and RSOs are centered. And we imagine some of our biggest stakeholders will be people in these like environmentally oriented RSOs.
Yeah, and these are things that you can figure out about your own community by reaching out to your neighbors, creating a survey, putting a sort of reach out questionnaire in your neighbor's mailbox, and sort of get a feel for the people that live around you and how they might be able to assist in the project you're wanting to develop.
So when we're thinking about site selection, we want to think about visibility, we want to think about where our stakeholders are located, and we want to think about how we can make the biggest impact on our community with the least amount of work. And that means selecting a site that is centered, that's going to have a lot of visibility, and because of all of that, a really high impact.
Once you've picked your site, the next thing you want to do is begin to document it. And there are a lot of different ways that you can go about sort of tracking the elements and characteristics that are happening in your site. That can be done both with sketching in your sketchbooks that you've made. You can pull out your phone or a camera and take real life photos of your site so you can remember them. How else could we go about?
We can also do a lot of diagramming.
Yeah.
We've talked about how important circulation is to site selection. So you can do simple diagrams of circulation, whether that's just arrows or you incorporate colors. Just kind of tracking loosely who's going where and what the traffic volume is.
Yeah, and in several of these other videos, you're being taught how to make technical drawings and things like plans and sections. If you don't have a long measuring tape or anything like that, your body is a really great tool to learn how to measure spaces. You can sort of figure out how long your individual foot size is, and then you can pace off your site or location to get a really rough estimate of how much square footage or length or width you're talking about in your site.
So now that we've selected our site and we have a feel for what it's about, the visibility, all of that important stuff, we're going to think about how we can actually design it, how it's going to have the most impact, and how it's going to affect all of our stakeholders and all of the people invested in this project.
So now that we are back from documenting our site and taking lots of photos and measurements and making sketches and all kinds of things, we're going to start making some base drawings, base sections and plans, and really just kind of the entry level portion of drawing your site is going to help us get a better idea of the actual space that we have to work with and how to begin the sort of design development process moving forward.
Yeah, so it's really important to, when you start drawing, whether that's in section, perspective, or plan, to have a really strong framework, usually built up of the sidewalks, buildings, and other hardscape elements that are gonna help you kind of create a reference point for what you're designing, create boundaries, that sort of thing. So we have our little site boundary evident here in this rectangle, and we have our major sidewalk routes bounding it. And we have the terrace of Fay Jones here, which is kind of our big signifier of where we are on campus, as well as the stairwell here. So we want to incorporate first our big structural trees and shrubs that are going to be producing fruit, as well as bounding the space of the garden. And so I'm going to add those in. This is about process. These first few steps in the design process are about getting your ideas onto paper so that you can come back and edit them, talk with your stakeholders, talk with your community leaders, and kind of get a feel for where everybody stands on the project and where you feel it's best you can move forward.
Yeah, you might have found with your stakeholders or your neighbors, whoever they might be, that they would be really interested if there was more color in the neighborhood. So maybe that really dictates you putting in more flowers than it does herbs, but maybe you got more comments about we'd love to have more of a garden where we can pull vegetables and fruits and things like that. And those are going to dictate the kind of things you want to put in your design or your project because you're basing it off of the overall needs of your community.
It can also be really helpful to jump back and forth between section, plan, and perspective. That's going to give you kind of a better all-around feel for what the space is like. So I'm kind of good with like where the plan portion of the drawing is, and I want to jump into section and really quickly add my scale figures. I know that this shrub is about 7 feet tall, so I'm going to add about a 6 foot tall figure in, and that's going to help me keep everything in scale and kind of help me to design how the space is going to look and how it's going to feel, especially. So this is kind of our foundation sketch. We have one prepared just underneath that's a little bit more final and something we would probably more likely submit to our city councilor, our community leaders, and kind of help to get this project off the ground and almost advertise it a little bit.
Now that we've sort of identified the final plans, the overall just kind of planning as a whole, we can really kind of start to talk about representation and how you might start to further some of these drawings and imagery to present to your stakeholders and other people in the community to really sell the overall idea. And this can be as simple as shading further with your pen and pencil, or you can get back in with watercolors and other form of representation to kind of bring more life and shadow and color to the drawings that you have. So we're going to kind of start going in and playing with some of the things that we have here just to really give more life and feel to the drawings that we have.
You also want to think about when you're doing drawings like this, it doesn't have to be super literal. We know, for example, that an apple tree is a certain shade of green. But if you wanted to get expressive with it and throw in some more abstract principles and make it more just expressive and evocative, that's totally welcome. A lot of drawings that end up selling a project are ones that don't take such a literal stance on what real life looks like. They're more about conveying the feeling of what it could be.
And things like being with more experimental with color and things like that, often you kind of assume that most shadows are black or gray. Your shadows can be blue, they can be purple. That's another way to really bring a lot of depth to the things that you're showing because things aren't necessarily the way that we assume that they are. So you can go in and get more depth by adding shadow around things and letting that dry for a second before you go in and add a little bit more depth to the things you have drawn. And then it's a great idea to take what you have at the current moment and take it back to your stakeholders, your community, and really start to lay down a foundation of your initial ideas, because you might get into a meeting or conversation or just a casual chat with a neighbor of yours on the sidewalk about something else they might like to add to what you've already started.
Yeah.
They might want to introduce something new.
So we've done the heavy lifting of the design idea, we've started to communicate it. Now we're going to take it to the stakeholders, see what they say, and adjust accordingly. So now that we're happy with where our design is, we've talked to our stakeholders, they've communicated that they want something a little more structural to kind of tie this all down. So we've talked about adding a shade structure. So I can go back to the drawing we've already done and just add that in really quickly. It's just going to be a simple kind of pergola situation.
And so really we're going to continue to wrap that up and make another version of it. And we're going to take it back to our community and have that same conversation again until we ultimately reach a point where everyone is really satisfied and there's a shared idea of what the final project is and everyone is really excited moving forward. With community design projects, it's always really important that you keep that conversation open with the people around you and ultimately come to a solution that everyone is really excited to keep working on.
So with everything we've done, we have a really clear trajectory on where this project's going. From brainstorming, we identified our project. We moved into identifying and organizing our stakeholders. From there, we thought about what site's going to be most impactful, and we selected a site that we felt we could really communicate the vision of the community with. We designed that out and did a little bit of back and forth with our stakeholders, and now we have a really clear trajectory working with our stakeholders and organizations of where this project can go in the future. I would say that we're ready to put this in the ground before long.
Now that we've finished our sort of demonstrative version of how we could execute a project like this on campus, we want to encourage you to get back out there in your community and find a way to do something similar. We've walked you through the steps. You understand how it really needs to go down. Ultimately, you just need to go and find the project that you're excited about, get involved with your community, and find a way that you can make a really great impact in the place that you live.